Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Unconnected.org webinar series made possible with thanks to the support of our sponsors at the GSR Foundation. I am your host, Danny Weiser, and in today's episode, we will delve into how the digital divide uniquely impacts LGBTQ plus communities. Digital tools obviously play a crucial role in keeping LGBTQ plus individuals connected with their community and give people in those often marginalized groups access to absolutely vital information and connectivity with other members. Not only will we obviously explore the benefits of the internet for those communities and for those individuals as part of those communities, but of course explore the barriers to access that exist globally as a consequence of the global digital divide. And of course, we'll address the importance of increasing digital infrastructure, but also we'll talk about how we can make online spaces safer and improve digital literacy amongst those individuals who, of course, have the right to exercise their capacity to navigate the digital world safely and securely. So to discuss these topics and more, I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderfully diverse panel today. First, we have, calling from Chicago, Olivia Johnson, an associate on research at the Engine Room. So with a deep passion for technology, surveillance, and the impact on AI and marginalized communities, the Engine Room and I'm sure Olivia's insights will be invaluable as Olivia specifically recently, with her colleagues, published a paper called Accessing Connection, Bridging Digital Divide for LGBTI Communities Worldwide. Prior to her role at the Engine Room, Olivia was a research consultant with the Immigrant Defense Project, focusing on surveillance technology, immigration policing. And Olivia holds a master's degree in migration studies and has contributed to numerous projects at nonprofits and at universities. So I'm really pleased to have Olivia on the panel. Joining us from Kampala, Uganda, is Sandra, who is a dedicated feminist and human rights activist with years of experience focusing on LGBTQ plus and women's rights. Sandra founded Her Internet, which is an organization that supports digital literacy and security for minority women and combats various internet inequalities that they frequently face all across Uganda. Sandra is a digital security trainer with multiple certificates in campaign training, media and documentation and leadership. And Sandra has also attended the African Women's Leaders Institute. So she brings today a wealth of knowledge and background in LGBTQ plus activism to our discussion. So again, really delighted to have Sandra with us. And lastly, but not least, I'm thrilled to have Umaima joining us, who is a Moroccan non-binary artist, who is one of the co-founders of Nasa Wiyat in Morocco. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Apologies if not, Umaima. The group is it's a feminist and LGBTQ plus group dedicated to queer activism and creating and maintaining safe, inclusive, and equitable spaces for the community there in Morocco. Umaima's experience spans across not just Morocco, but several continents, as they studied their bachelor's degree in political science at the University of Paris, I believe, and they spent significant time in Lebanon. So their first-hand experience in varied contexts across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, and of course, most importantly for today, online spaces will, I'm sure, be instrumental to this conversation. So thank you for joining us, Umaima. Now, that's enough from me. It's a lengthy introduction, but before our panelists share their experiences, their insights, their visions, how we can create a more digitally inclusive world for all, I'd like to begin, as we always do, by asking our esteemed guests, what does meaningful digital connection look like to them? So let's start with you, Sandra. What does it mean to you? What does meaningful digital connection look like? Let's hear it.
Thank you so much, Danny, for first of all giving me the opportunity to speak alongside such amazing people. So in my experience, and for me as well personally, meaningful connection refers to, first of all, access to the internet. Yeah. So having smartphones, laptops, desktops, whatever it is, the gadgets that are needed to connect to the internet, but also that starts with the infrastructure that is needed to connect to the internet. So if I, Sandra in Kampala, am able to connect, and someone who is up country in Uganda or in other areas that have been left behind in terms of infrastructure development are unable to connect, then it's not meaningful connection. Because even then it means if I have to travel, it will still be it will not be meaningful connection for myself and my work. But then in my experience and our work at Her Internet, we usually travel up country for, digital security trainings, digital literacy trainings, and it's so difficult to engage with the communities there meaningfully without the proper infrastructure to enable them access the internet and connect to the internet. So that's one issue. The other is in terms of literacy levels. There is, low literacy levels, especially within the LGBTQ community in Africa, but I'll speak to my experience specifically in Uganda. Because of a multitude of reasons, we are unable to complete school because of discrimination, stigmatization. Forgive my English, it has visited somewhere. So unable to complete school, unable to, engage in social events whereby we can, strengthen our capacities. And for a community that is really, not validated, it is criminalized. It's also very hard to gather within our community and, strengthen our capacity in digital literacy. So that's also, enabling the digital divide. Meaningful connection for me also means being able to enjoy being online without worrying about hate speech, without worrying about body shaming, without worrying about being called my dead name, without worrying about being outed, without worrying about, so whatever it is that comes with online safety and digital security, for me also means that meaningful connection and meaningful access. And in the vacuum of that, so in a space where we don't feel safe to even be online, still, even if you have the infrastructure and you have the equipment and you have the knowledge and technical know-how, you're still not meaningfully connected. Because if a part of your identity is being invalidated and being, questioned and being, hidden, it's still, you're not connecting meaningfully, because what the internet has offered us is that it has offered us the opportunity to network beyond borders. But if physically within the border that I reside in, I'm unsafe, then I won't be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So that's how I would understand meaningful connection, meaningful access. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It's a very, very in-depth answer, and I look forward to kind of exploring numerous of those areas more in this conversation. Let's turn now to Amima. I'd love to hear from you. What does meaningful digital connection look like? Amima, can you hear us?
Yes, now I hear you. I think
Perfect.
we've
Yes.
I've
Yeah,
been
we're-
on mute seconds.
Okay, so yeah, so what does meaningful digital connection look like to you?
Well, I mean, digital connection, and I completely join Sandra in all what she presented, and I just want to add, for me, like for the LGBTIQ plus community in Morocco, digital spaces are a very are spaces where people can connect, people can also feel that they are less alone, that are not alone in their identities. They also have the right, I mean, they have the accessibility to search about what are their identities and why is this and why is that. And I know that I know that a lot of people find themselves through forums when, when that's time of forums, and then Facebook, and now Instagram, and a lot of places like social media plays a very, very big part of, um, I can say, the LGBTIQ or the queer liberation in Morocco, but also in many places in the world. But also in these places, I mean, not everyone have access, as Sandra said, like not everyone has access. So at the end, we don't have connection with everyone from every places in Morocco. This is something that I know that we try to, we work very hard about the accessibility, but also as much as digital connection and digital presence of the LGBTIQ community in Morocco, I also think that it's very dangerous sometimes. Like we've been witnessing in 2020 when there was like it was the COVID time, total lockdown, and there was the very big outing campaign because of one of our of it was a trans influencer who outed a lot of people by giving names of dating applications, for example, like gay dating applications. And it was very, very like very hard for us, the community. And also I know that today dating applications are used by many homophobic, transphobic, and sometimes also by authorities and by police to arrest or steal or beat or like harm in many ways people from the community. And I think it's just like the lack of law frames, the lack of protection of LGBTIQ community in Morocco that today makes the digital connection is very, very important, and very also like makes it's easier to connect, but at the same time can make it very dangerous when there is nothing, no laws to protect. Especially like in Morocco, what's happened is that like I remember in maybe 2021 or 2022 there was that campaign from the Ministry I don't know if it was the Ministry of Communication, but they had that campaign to avoid harassment, saying, "Hey, if you don't want, I mean, stop sending your pictures through social media." And for us, it's not. This is like not the right things to do. I mean, you can't stop cyber harassment by asking users to stop using it. It's just like stop leaving if you don't want to get to be dead, you know. So we also try as Nasawiyat to find ways to share with people how to use wisely the digital spaces, how to share pictures, how to, when we don't talk, I mean, it's very important to have tools to get protected in social media. So yeah, that's my part from for this. But yes, I mean, until now, because also that we don't have I mean, LGBTQ plus community is either criminalized or don't or stigmatized in Morocco. And gather, or we can do things. So many of our work is still online, and not just us as Soviets. It's also today we are approximately 9 to 10 organization and collectives working on these issues, and most of our work today is online. So online spaces are very, very important. And we wish that we can have access, and that's more people can have access to the online, to this online spaces. Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's exactly the point, is that, for marginalized communities, online spaces are arguably even more important, and yet they're even more fragile, because those spaces reflect the world in which we live. And so often online spaces, which are very much needed for these communities, are sometimes targeted. And we need to obviously try and find a way in which we can include people, but include people meaningfully and safely. So not just giving people the internet, but bring them the internet in a way in which we can use it. So I'd like to now turn to Olivia. And Olivia, before I kind of ask you the very same question, I'd like you to try and answer this question more thinking from your own personal point of view, rather than from a slightly more academic perspective, because I would like to get into your research paper afterwards. But just first, I'd like to know, just on a personal level, what does meaningful digital connection look like to you?
Sure. Sorry, I paused. There was an ambulance. It was
No
quite loud.
worries.
A bit of a noisy city. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thank you, Danny, for organizing this panel, and Sandra and Umaima for your responses. I feel like following that up as a third panelist is not daunting, but I feel like you covered so much. It was so comprehensive already. I think when it comes to meaningful connection, I think, wow, I think it's multiple levels, as has been discussed. I think firstly, it's the ability to connect online, right? So I think that's having the infrastructure, that's having the devices, that's having affordable internet, right? I think even if you have a device, if it's too expensive to have data or to have broadband, then that's not meaningful access. I think having public Wi-Fi spaces as well is really essential, but having public Wi-Fi that is not also a tool of surveillance is essential within that as well, where you can go to a library or go to a bus stop and use your phone and not be worried that a government or another entity is using that space to spy on you. I think having the digital literacy and the digital security skills to navigate the internet is so essential to spot phishing scams, oh my goodness, to spot issues of fraud. I think being able to use the internet and not be worried about your safety, and know how to navigate threats if they arise is really essential. And I think within that, there's a really, I know I won't make it academic, but there's from the Association of Progressive Communications, when they talk about meaningful connectivity, they bring it up, not just access for who, but access to what. And I think that's something that has really shaped how I think about meaningful connection, because it's what you can do online, right? So can you find the information you need? Can you find the resources that you need? Can you find the communities that you're looking for online? Are there language appropriate resources? Since the internet is so heavily in English, right? And so can you even do anything when you're online, right? And then, of course, being online without fearing for your safety, without fearing for surveillance, without fearing from political repression, online bullying, having, really adequate and good content moderation, I think is really essential in social media. I think, yeah, just being able to use the internet in a way that is fun and free, and well, free being like you feel free on the internet, but I also very affordable or free in the cost method, I guess, as well. I'm going to stop. I think I'm rambling, and I think so much has been covered before I got to this question. So
You're not rambling at all. You've raised some very interesting points, and I actually want to bring both Sandra and Amima to kind of talk about the Ugandan and the Moroccan context on the point of affordability. So obviously, one of the points that Olivia raised was about free public Wi-Fi spaces, but surveillance would of course be an issue for the LGBTQ plus communities in both Morocco and Uganda. Can you tell us a little bit about both the affordability of data packages in both Uganda and Morocco, but then also talk about those public spaces? Are they available? Are they only in urban areas? Are there risks of surveillance? Can you talk us through those? So, Sandra, let's start with you in the Ugandan context.
Thank you so much. So, where do I start from with the Banana Republic? So firstly, there is no affordable data plan in Uganda. And it doesn't matter what social class you belong to, that internet is just not affordable. It is not something that we prioritize. And so this is even worse for the LGBTQ community because you're prioritizing safety, you're prioritizing what to eat, you're prioritizing, so many things, you're juggling so many things with solitary resources that having a data plan or being connected is not as much of a priority as other basic necessities. So, and it doesn't even matter for which service provider. All of them are really, really expensive.
Can I just jump in, Sandra, and ask you, so in Uganda, are you saying that not only are members of the LGBTQ plus community having to spend more money than the average citizen because of needing to spend money on safety, for example, the safety measures. But I'm also curious to know, are members of the community also kind of excluded from the kind of traditional job market, or is it harder for people to land high-paying jobs within the community in Uganda?
Absolutely, absolutely. It would be a miracle if there was a community member who was in a high-paying job. Forgive my fur babies outside. So it would be a miracle to find a community member, a colleague who is in a well-to-do job, especially if it's mainstream, in a mainstream company, mainstream organization, for example, any telecom company, or maybe a government position, or, whatever it is. It's really, really difficult. But all this stems from, the highly homophobic environment we are in, the homophobic society that we are in, and the systems and structures that disable and make us not, I guess, not be part of public and civic discourse and civic spaces, because right down from the education levels, right down from family relations and friends, because in Uganda, there's a lot of, who do you know who can connect you to a particular job, a particular circle. And so in the lack of that family and friend circle, that kind of supports you to be able to climb the social ladder and get a well-paying job, be better placed socially, live in a good neighborhood, just basically have a great lifestyle is non-existent. So
resources are just inherently lower for people in the community, and therefore internet is even more unattainable because of the high cost. Could you give us an example of how much a data package might cost, for example, in Uganda?
So maybe for most of the telecom companies, on average, 2 GB of data would cost about $1.50.
What does that equate to in terms of the average kind of salary?
There is people who don't even, earn $1 a day. They're living below $1 a day. There is those who are completely 100% dependent on other people. So if you're dependent, you're not going to depend on someone for food, for shelter, and also depend on them for internet connection, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the situation that we are working with. And there are also no places with public Wi-Fi. They're just not there.
So
Yeah,
the issue of surveillance isn't even a worry, it's because there's just not even the
they're just
spaces
not
there.
there.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, of course, some cafes advertise that they have free Wi-Fi, free public Wi-Fi, but then the connection is like really, really slow. It's really, really bad. And if you're connecting with a VPN, it's even worse. So it's just like that. You're just, jumping through hoops to even get
Yes.
a legit connection. I know there is public Wi-Fi at the airport, but how many people have access to the airport? I mean, you only go there if you're traveling, and that's not something for the ideal LGBTQ individual in Uganda, So, and even then, the Wi-Fi at the airport is obviously heavily surveilled,
Sure.
heavily, because of the political, the kind of political system and structures we have in Uganda, where we've had one president for the past 40 years, and anyone who raises a voice, whether online or offline, is considered a political opposition member, and therefore highly surveilled, tracked, everything. So public Wi-Fi at the airport is just a no-no, even if you, get the chance to travel. So that's
Okay.
kind of the situation that we're working with. And it's
Well,
also
okay. Sorry, I'd just like to bring Mimima in now, just because I'm aware of time, and I'd like to keep the conversation moving. But thank you for sharing that, Sandra. So Mimima, staying in Africa, but moved from east to north, in Morocco. Can you describe the situation in terms of affordability of internet, and are there public Wi-Fi spaces as a starting point?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. And yeah, I completely relate with Sandra, and it's not that different from Morocco, but internet used to be cheap at some point. I remember in the early at the beginning of internet, it was kind of cheap. Now it's getting more expensive, but I know that it's like still cheaper than the US, for example, or the Americas. But at the same time, we don't have the money of it's like
It's
it
relative.
depends.
Yeah.
It's very relative. So today, internet, like access to internet, the thing is that we don't have access to internet everywhere in the country. There are a lot of places where network doesn't exist, and not just network, hospitals and schools also. Um, but yeah, I mean, but also in big cities like Morocco, it's like this country where you can find very modern, very big cities where we have like the second biggest mall in Africa. I don't know, the biggest tower in Africa, blah blah, those kind of things. But at the same time, people dying because there is 3 millimeter of snow. So yeah, it's like two speeds, uh, and and still, and also like in big cities, people still don't have really access to internet everywhere, and today internet is like you want for 1 gigabyte, it costs $1 for 1 gigabyte. And for years, anyone can buy a number without IDs, and now it's mandatory to have an ID to get a number.
So do you think that as a member of the LGBT plus community increases risk of surveillance, increases risk of outings,
Mhm.
because your internet usage is linked to your ID?
Completely. Uh, but then there are many places where you can find free Wi-Fi, but still like more in cafes. So you still need to buy a cafe, or you need to pay for it. But I think there are places where people can. I mean, I know that's like I don't know, like places where people can go and just like take Wi-Fi free Wi-Fi, but still, I mean, we are also a country that's surveillance. It's a very high surveillance country. We have one of the best secret services of the world. So, and the system is just like, we know that everyone knows about us, but at the same time, trying to make it out of the best so that we can protect ourselves. I know that using VPN can be risky in the way that if they caught us using VPN, it can mean that that's there is something that is tricky, I mean risky, so can highlight and put activists in danger.
Can I ask you then? So when you're, for example, living in Paris, did you just feel inherently, obviously there's stigma towards the LGBTQ plus community everywhere in the world, but in terms of kind of legality, I imagine the situation in Morocco is a lot stronger in terms of it being criminalized. Did you feel safer using the internet when you were in France rather than in Morocco?
Yeah, kind of, but not completely, because at the end I go back to Morocco, and
Sure.
at the end, if I will be having like a very strong political opinion that is maybe against the current system, when I go back to Morocco, it will be it's risky for me. But as a queer activist, we know what are the red lines that we don't have to overstep. So we also choose our battle, and we choose how. I mean, we try to be strategizing to say that we know that we are stigmatized, we are criminalized. So maybe there are some points that we can't really talk about because we are already very weak. I mean, not weak as we are weak activists, but more like we are the most marginalized and oppressed community in Morocco. So, so yeah, I mean, I think the feeling of safety is, yeah, of course. I mean, in France, there are less chances to get arrested because of a tweet. I don't know if we still say it's a tweet, but
I'm lost on that too.
but yeah, I mean, but at the same time, also like Morocco have this thing that they will be more I mean, I know that they do this with journalists. They do that with activists that really bother them a lot, so people need to be careful. But also I know that lately some people who not really just from the LGBTIQ community, but also people who will just say something about religion, that got arrested, and they had like 2-3 years jail time, so so yeah, I mean, I think we still, I mean, I still think that we need to be careful about what we say on social media. But at the same time, we can still say what we want, but in different ways, so that we can still be more safe. Yeah.
So, I mean, Sandra, thank you for kind of sharing about the socioeconomic factors that impact LGBTQ plus people's access to digital resources, and Mima for touching on that, and also for kind of raising some of the security issues. Olivia, I'd like to kind of bring you in here, more of an academic level now. So moving slightly away from just the Ugandan and Moroccan context, if we kind of look globally, how has the digital divide evolved over, let's say, the past decade or so, for LGBTQ plus individuals? Have you noticed there's been a shift? Is the divide increasing? Are we seeing areas where there's more inclusivity? How would you kind of describe the global state of affairs?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. Over the past decade, well, I think first it's important to note that there isn't a ton of data when it comes to the LGBTI digital divide, right? Because there isn't a ton of data of LGBTI people using the internet, and most of the statistics when it comes to internet access are kind of driven along lines of rural-urban divides, gender divides, which are pretty cisgender, most likely in terms of data collection, and follow, male-female binaries. We see more like racial demographics, I think, as well as ethnic demographics. So this is just something that there just isn't a ton of data for. I think even in this report, a lot of it was parsing together separate data sets and then kind of making assumptions or inferences based off of that. So knowing if we look at unemployment data, right, for LGBTI communities in various contexts, if we look at homelessness data, if we look at just general connectivity data, and we can see people who below this income level typically lack access to the internet. And then we look at, statistics of what percentage of LGBTI plus communities in, let's say, the EU has a lot of data on this, right? So let's say in the EU, and then we can kind of make inferences, but even then, those aren't specific data sets or specific data collection solely about this. But in terms of how things have changed, I think something that potentially has changed, and this is just more of an assumption than anything else, based off what I've seen, is that as the digital divide has in some ways shrunk as more people have gone online, I'm assuming that there are greater disparities in who doesn't have access to the internet, right? And I think the lack of access is becoming more and more stark because and beyond like urban rural, which I think is still pretty obvious in what people think of and will be an ongoing issue with just the lack of infrastructure and in environments where it's difficult to build infrastructure, whether that's more of a jungle terrain or mountainous, where it's very hard to have connection, also where there's no economic incentives to build infrastructure. I think that's going to be an ongoing thing. But then I think, especially within the urban context, who has access is really driven also on economic lines. And so I think, and then when we look at economic lines in terms of who it has been historically marginalized within societies, right? And who faces high levels of poverty and discrimination in the workplace and lacks legal protection, right? Like I think all of these are connected to online access because it's very hard to be online if you don't have an income because it costs money to be online. And I think it's interesting how much of these issues are also class issues. And then of course, beyond that, it's whether your experience is online. And then I think, again, we're seeing that more and more now with the advent of social media, which I think has grown a lot within the past 10 years. And I think, the rise in AI and other technology and not so much to even move it into that space. But I think we're seeing a lot of, disproportionate repercussions on online harms on marginalized communities and especially LGBTI plus communities.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's a very important point because I think quite often within the digital divide space, people kind of fall into the trap of thinking that the main divide is just quite simply rural and urban, and that's far from being the case. I've got a question for you, Maima. I'm aware that you're going to have to head off soon before we wrap up. So just a kind of final question for you, Maima. I'm curious to know in what kind of way do you see limited digital access impacting both employment opportunities for LGBTQ plus people, but also access to educational resources. Are you seeing that just being part of a community can limit people's digital access to both those two fundamental rights of employment and education in the system in which we live?
I'm not sure I really understand your question.
So
Do you mean
so
like
For example, a
Mhm.
member of the LGBTQ plus community in Morocco, would they have any additional challenges accessing educational resources online compared to somebody who's not a member of a community because of them being marginalized? And the same thing goes for employment. Obviously, we touched on employment slightly with Sandra in Uganda, but I'm curious to know whether digital access or lack of digital literacy or digital capability is limiting to people in Morocco's ability to access education.
Mhm. Well, I don't think that it's really, I mean, I don't think that it's really different from a queer person from a non-queer person when it comes to this matter, you know, like today in Morocco we have like very catastrophic numbers when it comes to the ranks, when it comes to the education, when it comes to employment, when it comes to health, we're all those things. Like today we really lack of those basic fundamental rights for everyone, and more and it's worse for marginalized community, and one of the marginalized community is the queer community. So today I think like lack of but I think like the LGBTIQ plus community that is online, that has also some networks online that could construct some networks online, have access to some tools, and have access to some content that other people don't really have. So I think it's also like I see it in a positive way, you know. It's like that when we are considered as marginalized, when we are also being seen um, as not really I mean, I know that a lot of people in real life from the community, from the queer community, don't have access to education and drop out from school because of discrimination. And I think about especially I think about trans people who at some point they just like drop out from schools and don't finish their education. When they don't finish their education, they don't have access to employment, and just like I know that today, like one of the things that we do within Nesawiyat is that we have like workshops around I don't know, around cybersecurity, around artistic tools like photography, cinema. So we try to create a content that is like an alternative content for this community who doesn't have
So it's
access.
educational resources which are almost targeted or tailored towards the community to be more
Exactly,
inclusive and to aid.
exactly,
Okay, I see.
exactly.
So
We are
aside,
So just like,
sorry,
and we are to do all this because we have online spaces, but I know that the limits today is that online spaces are not enough.
yes.
But because, as I said, we lack of basic and fundamental rights. That is like housing, health, education, employment, and today we also need to be in real life spaces to advocate for our rights. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us in Mind Map. You just touched on a point which I actually would like Sandra to talk about here, which is about what role does digital technology play in accessing healthcare for LGBTQ plus communities. I'm particularly thinking about access to information, healthcare, information about HIV, other sexually transmitted diseases, and just more widely speaking healthcare potentially even within pandemic. What role does technology play uh, and why is it so necessary?
Thank you for that. And I'll just want to piggyback off what Umaima said a little while back around censorship. So being online for many LGBTQ folk who are in such in a homophobic context means self-censorship. When they censor themselves from, sharing the information that they know, inadvertently, it limits others from also accessing that information. And most notably, it's health information, it's security information. So the fact that anything to do with LGBTIQ content online is automatically criminalized, it's automatically, attracts hate speech, bullying, and harassment, means that because people self-censor, there is others from the community who are going to miss out on accessing such important health information around, STIs, around COVID, around where to get free and friendly services, health service provision, around security. For example, don't go to this area today because maybe there is something happening there. And so because of self-censorship and other forms of censorship, whether it's state actors or non-state actors, it limits information shared amongst the LGBTQ community and folks. And I think it's the homophobes have realized that the internet is our space. It's a space where we are mobilizing, we are sharing information, we are organizing, we are, that's our safe, seemingly safe space. And so they've weaponized it. In Uganda, we have a whole law on computer misuse. It's the Computer Misuse Act. And you realize that it's really targeting political opponents. But because LGBTQI folk are used as scapegoats during political campaigns and the political season, we are also targets of that law. So you could be arrested for anything. I could be arrested for having this webinar with you because I'm apparently misusing the computer to either promote homosexuality or to, something like that. So
Sandra, sorry. So without wishing to kind of give any secrets away, how are you making yourself safe to, let's say, even just do this webinar, for example? How are you protecting yourself against those laws?
There is no foolproof way. That's all I can tell you. We are just existing because we shall not be pushed out of our country. We shall not be pushed out of our existence and our identity. We are here to stay. We are here to occupy space. We are here to participate meaningfully in all public and civic discourse. And for me, that's our stand, because many of our colleagues who have felt really unsafe have left the country. But we can't all leave. It's just not feasible, even if we wanted to. It's just not. So we are here and we are doing the best we can in the context that we have. Obviously, like I keep mentioning, the overarching issue here in Uganda is political. So as long as you aren't being so political or so vocal about, being in the opposition or wanting the government to change or stuff like that, regime change and all, you'll most likely fly under the radar. But that doesn't mean that you're safe. It doesn't automatically give you a safety net. It's just that you're existing, but you're not a big fish for state actors to, to come in and arrest you or prevent you from existing. However, the situation is actually.
So Sandra, I just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Sorry, I believe there's a bit of a delay. I apologize. I just wanted to ask you. You mentioned that some of your colleagues have left Uganda. What kind of role would you say that allyship from those colleagues, from, let's say, NGOs, from even telecommunications organizations themselves, what kind of role does that allyship kind of play or can play? Would you like to see play in bridging digital divide for LGBTQ plus populations and communities? What support are you seeking?
Yes, so we are seeking for advocacy, international advocacy, because advocating for ourselves here is a crime. You obviously put a target on your back. Once you say I'm queer and I'm advocating for queer rights, automatically there is a target on your back. So my request would be that for those who are outside these borders, continue the advocacy, keep on speaking on our behalf in those spaces. If it's possible to invite us to those spaces, like I am here now, to speak for ourselves, it would also be great. International organizations also have a role to play in terms of applying pressure to the government to kind of repeal such laws and enable people to meaningfully participate in online spaces. But also tech platforms, big tech has a big role to play because we are users of their products. And so as users of their products, the assumption is that they're going to take care of our safety, take care of our mental wellness as we utilize these platforms, which is not the case. Facebook has been closed in Uganda since 2021. It's been closed. You can only access Facebook using a VPN. And I think I had a conversation with Meta some time back about it, and they were very clear. They said they're not part of, they're not going to involve themselves in internal affairs. Uganda is a state. It's independent. It can make its own decisions. But then where does that leave the users that you have? I know, the whole thing is, the bottom line is the decision making value here. But then at the end of the day, it's not in any way enabling the close of the digital divide, because many folks actually access the internet through Facebook. It's the biggest social media platform that they access, that they know of. And so if a big chunk of us is cut out from that space because of in-country politics, and as a tech platform, you can't step in to say, hey, how can we have this discussion to, solve it amicably, then you're enabling the digital divide to continue, especially for the most marginal voices.
And Olivia, obviously we've touched on a fair number of kind of quite dreary, almost depressing areas of the digital divide in terms of lack of affordability, in terms of surveillance, in terms of censorship, all of these areas. Let's bring some positivity into the conversation. From your research, what are some examples of either tech innovations that have positively impacted the LGBTQ plus communities, or even just examples of digital spaces becoming more inclusive and digital literacy perhaps even improving in some areas? Can you bring some positivity into the conversation?
Sure. It's so easy to slip into this is everything that's wrong, But no, I mean, I think, even just as a whole from this research, what was so inspiring is every organization that we interviewed, everyone is using the internet. Everyone is finding ways that work for them. People are using online events. They are finding, for the most part, almost all our interviewees found, online spaces to be relatively much safer, right? Nothing is truly safe, but much safer as ways to gather, to find community. I think something that's come up a lot is for young people, especially. The internet has been such a fruitful place to learn, to find educational resources, to find sexual health resources, sexuality resources, right? There's so much more information online, and there's so much more affirming information and validating information online. And I think a lot of organizations are, taking in stride the circumstances that they're working in, and then they're finding ways to navigate that, right? So whether that's working, our interview in Brazil brought in digital security and digital literacy courses for their organization, right? To teach young people specifically how to use the internet safely and in a way that brings joy and like liberation to the spaces, right? So thinking through, how can we use this tech that wasn't designed for us necessarily, or has caused a lot of harms, but how can we use it safely, and how can we use it in the way that it's benefiting us? I think in general, just the emphasis on both digital security and digital literacy, I think, I don't know why I'm struggling so much with that word, have been really big areas where organizations where that's not really their focus have seen the need to either learn more or send staff to trainings or to do trainings for community members, which I think is great. I think all of us need more digital security, like no matter our backgrounds, right? I think that's something that we all should be moving online in a much safer way. And so I think that's really inspiring to see organizations really taking the lead there. I think this is something that I don't think always big tech is focused on, but it's something they're aware of. I think Grindr should be doing a lot more than it's doing, but they have released digital safety guides. I think they're being a lot more cognizant about how dating apps have been weaponized against LGBTI members, especially throughout the Swana region. And I think they're taking it more seriously, not as seriously as they could, but they are taking it more seriously. And I think there's been a lot more pressure on companies to step up. And I think that's also important, which was what Sandra was also saying, which is that, you know, the responsibility at the end of the day is on companies. And I think a lot of smaller organizations and activists are also really seeing that and applying pressure, which is hopefully, you know, and there's some promising legislation. So not everything is dire, but
Sure.
there's like hope within that.
Well, I mean, look, I think one of the areas of hope could definitely be from organizations like Sandra's Her Internet. I'd like you to tell us and our audience who's watching a little bit about the work that you do, the things that you've achieved, and let's kind of hear your story in a bit more detail, Sandra.
Thank you so much. So at Her Internet, our overarching niche is to support digital literacy, digital security, and advocate against online violence. What we've done to that effect is that we've equipped several LBQ women, because that's our constituencies, with digital security and digital literacy knowledge, information, skills, and tools. And this has been especially useful post-COVID. And also, you know, because of the recent Anti-Homosexuality Act that was passed last year. So those tips have come in really handy, not just for those who are in the central region, but for also those who are up country, because even in the country, the context differs in different geographical locations. So you find that people in the northern region are dealing with the post-war kind of context. People in the Eastern are dealing with oil mining and having to, you know, give up their land and be homeless and stuff. So there's different contexts, basically. What we've also done is really share information across all our social media pages. We do have running themes for each weekday. And so these are across, it could be about unplugging and the importance of digital detox. It could be about any new tech opportunity that is available out there that queer women can take advantage of. It could be introduction of a new app that maybe people have not really heard about and how safe it is. So opportunities, it's different things across our social media platforms that we do in terms of information sharing. We've done a great deal of work around fighting online violence, and fighting online violence, we've realized, starts with defining it, what it is, what it looks like, how it manifests in different scenarios, but also talking about the offline, online, kind of violence, how online activities influence on offline violence and how offline activities influence online violence. So kind of having that discussion so that people are able to tell when they are in a bad situation and be able to avoid it. We've also done quite a number of research. Our latest research has been on how social media algorithms impact community organizing, LGBTQ community organizing in Uganda, because also, with AI and everything, we realize that algorithms continuously are responsible for the kind of feed that we see on our social media pages. And so we had to, dive deep and see how is it impacting also our organizing, considering that we are in a repressive context, right? So yeah, in a nutshell, that's really it. We do a lot of in-space holding creating safe spaces at our office premises where we have a resource center that queer people can come and access and utilize laptops and computers for free, Wi-Fi for free safely, without worrying about surveillance, without worrying about their data being misused, without worrying about, stuff like that. And also, upskilling them in terms of how do I write a resume? How do I apply for this opportunity? I've never used a computer before. Where do I start from? So that's really everything that we do. Everything that we do is hinged on ensuring that we have as many queer women connecting to the internet as possible, as many queer women utilizing online spaces as safely as they can, but also making sure that they have the information so that even as they navigate online spaces, it's from a point of knowledge.
Well, listen, I'm sure that I can speak for, well, on behalf of unconnected.org by saying that I would implore all of our listeners and audience to support the work that Sandra and her team are doing to support queer women in Uganda. Of course, you can also partner with us, support us as well, our projects to help bridge the digital divide across the globe. And yeah, I just want to say to Olivia, Sandra, and to Amima as well, who unfortunately had to leave a few minutes early. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm sure we could have a whole another few hours on this. There's numerous areas we could talk about, whether it's the impact of digital divide on people's mental health within within the LGBTQ plus community, or specifically the effects of the digital divide on of a community who live in rural areas. There are so many topics we could touch on, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So once again, thank you to my three wonderful guests. We'll try to have you back on again, hopefully very soon. And thank you, of course, as always, to the GSR Foundation for sponsoring this webinar series. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for listening to what is a really important conversation, listening to these wonderful voices kind of explore the various challenges and successes as well that the LGBTQ plus community face in the context of digital divide, digital inclusion. And as always, remember, let's stay connected. Thank you. Bye-bye.